Okay, hello, who's out there? Welcome to my live. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I'm broadcasting using Ecamm, which in actual fact, if I want to get all the details from everyone that I'm watching, you need to subscribe to Ecamm. You don't want to do that, so I just need to check that this is going out on my phone, because it's actually on my phone that I'll be able to. Okay, hello, who's out there? Okay, so that's good. We're going out live. Hello, James. Hello, Dave. What time is it? It's 11 o'clock in LA. Good to hear it. Well, it's 4 a.m. here in Sydney, but don't worry, I'm showered, I'm caffeinated, I've had my ginseng, I've had my MCT oil, so you guys are in for a treat. Let me just turn that off on my phone and set that to that. Just give me 1 second. As soon as I've done this, we'll be good to go. Technology. Okay. Alrighty, let's get started. So first of all, what I will do is I will share my screen with you, and I'm going to do that by going here, and whoops, that was right at the end. All right. So hopefully you can see that. If you can't, if for any reason you can't, let me know in the comments, and I will adjust it. We had a bit of an issue last time with sharing the screen, but hopefully that will not be happening. All right. So welcome. You're here to hear me talk about Pitchcraft, which is my patented processes for getting your director treatments pitch perfect. Relax. What I will do is I will send you a complete copy of this presentation afterwards. So you don't need to worry about taking massive notes. I do suggest you get a pen and paper, because I think there's going to be some stuff that you're going to hear that's going to be useful, that you'll want to jot down. You know, one of the things that we say in recovery is the longest journey is from the head to the heart, but that happens through the hands. So I always find that if I want to remember stuff, I write it down. But you know, let's get started. Before we start, first of all, let me know, where are you from? Who's here? I see we have New York, Nashville, Sao Paulo. Nice. Haven't been to South America. We're supposed to be going there this year. Okay, so first off, why are we here? So I've got a very, very specific outcome in mind today. My goal is to demonstrate to you that getting your director treatments pitch perfect is the most effective way to win more work and increase board flow. And it's only available through Pitchcraft. There are other, I've done a lot of competition analysis. There are increasingly more companies that write treatments on the interwebs these days, of varying different standards and qualities. But there's currently no one out there that has the level of experience that I do. It's like I've made TV commercials. I've made about 3,000 TV commercials. I've worked in agencies as a top tier creative, lastly as ECD at BBDO and JWT. So I understand how agencies talk. I understand how they think, and I have this God-given talent for being able to take the mundane and spin it into the magnificent. And that essentially is what a director's treatment is. So let's hear it. Who wants to win more pitches? What would your life be like if you could win more pitches? Type yes if this is what you want to do. Commenting in my live feed is magic. Whatever you wish for, you will be given. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, you're here because you want to win more pitches. The more pitches you win, the more work you get. The more work you have, the more choice you have. The more choice you have, the more power you have. The more power you have, the more money you make. and the more money you make, the more freedom you have. So winning pitches is a really good thing. It's what we all want. It's why we're all here. I'm going to do a quick recap of what I talked about in the first live, because a lot of people said that they wanted, they were interested in hearing that. So first of all, let's look at some of the challenges people are facing. Most of the issues that people face when it comes to writing treatments are, I would say number one is the biggest one, is people hate writing treatments. For some reason, I'm really, really lucky. I like writing treatments. I'm not sure what that is. As I said, I've been an ECD. I've had a big job in agencies. I've done everything from writing copy for press, print, magazine, billboard, TVs, digital, posters, radio. Remember when there was radio? But for some reason, I love writing treatments. And I think one of the reasons I enjoy doing it is because it's for someone else, because my ego is not on the line. It's someone else's idea. And I can go full big picture. Most of my clients struggle with writing treatments. I mean, the key issues that they've spoken to me about is a lack of confidence. They feel, what they've said to me is that they feel uncomfortable being in sales mode. And I can understand that. There's one thing that, the billionaire, the most famous billionaire that you've never heard of is probably a guy called Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel was, he founded PayPal. He actually brought on Elon Musk on board for PayPal. He recruited Elon Musk. It's a long story worth looking at. He was a first round investor in Facebook, and he wrote an excellent book called 0 to 1, which I strongly recommend you read. It's probably the best book on business ever written. And one of the things that he talks about is, he says, if you want to have a really, really successful business, if you want to, if you want to found something that's truly innovative, ask yourself, what secret do you know? Or what is one thing that you believe that very few people would agree with you on? And I read that and I thought, oh, I've got to have a think about this. And, I sort of reflected on it for a couple of weeks. And frankly, I couldn't come up with anything. Because when I say it, you're going to agree with me. And it's not so much a secret. It's more of a paradox. And the paradox is creative people, and we're talking right at the moment about people who work in advertising. It doesn't matter whether they're copywriters or whether they're art directors, whether they're directors or producers. Creative people are absolutely shit at marketing themselves. It's an anomaly. We're great at creating these incredible campaigns for clients and for brands. We have no problem doing it. But actually shining the spotlight on ourselves and getting comfortable with talking about what we do, our levels of expertise, what we can contribute, and essentially why we're great, we just freeze up. It's visibility. Visibility is difficult. People struggle with it. It makes you feel vulnerable. It makes you feel judged. It makes you feel like it puts you literally in a very raw and naked place. And pitching is part of that. People like doing, they don't necessarily like talking about the doing. Other things that clients struggle with is they feel that they don't have a structure for a pitch or a treatment. They don't know how, they don't know, they don't have a solid approach. They don't have a process. They're scared of being pushy. They're scared of being too over the top. They're scared of sounding cheesy. So much of this just comes down to fear. Actually, that's what stops most people getting on in life. They call it, whether it's fear, whether it's anxiety, whether it's resistance, it's essentially all party words for fear. So those are the challenges that most of my clients face, and that is what this little workshop will help you overcome. He says, segueing into the opportunities. Now, what are the opportunities? Getting your pitches tight. They're huge. So much of this, if you can become, if you can get good at pitching, that means you will have more confidence. You will have more certainty. about yourself as an individual and what you can deliver for a client. You will have conviction, because essentially that's what clients buy. One thing that I always try and demonstrate is when I'm dealing with clients is monster conviction. I mean, I actually did it just like 5 minutes ago. I was talking about my background as an executive creative director at JWT, as an executive creative director at JWT and BBDO, having worked in advertising for 3 decades, having written 3,000 commercials, in boardrooms from the US, London, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Australia. I'm certain that I can deliver value. I have that certainty. And the thing is, you need to be able to communicate that. And when you do communicate that, it becomes very compelling. It is so great having a structure for your pitches, for your treatment. So anytime something goes on, you know what it is that you have to do. You've got a bunch of checkpoints. Of course, it will up your strike rate. You'll start winning more work. And once again, when you win more work, you get more choice, right? When you've got more choice, you've got more power. When you've got more power, you've got more freedom. When you've got more freedom, your life just becomes more fluid and open and just better overall. Also, the more work you win, the more your board flow will increase, right? There's something that I'm going to talk about later called the A-list advantage. And it's kind of like a virtuous circle. It's like, success feeds on itself, just in the same way that failure feeds on itself. Sorry, I'm just looking down there to look at my phone because I like to see who's jumping on. And board flow is great. The more work, really what you want to do is you want to be in the position that sort of like 8 to 10 of my clients are. Which is where you're turning work away. I mean, that is a great position to be in. And the other thing is, and I found this doing these trainings, putting together my Pitchcraft masterclass, it's the more you talk about what it is that you do, what it is that you offer, and the value that you can put out in the world, oddly enough, the more you communicate that, your actual value seems to increase. I don't quite understand why that happens, but I think at one level what happens is you get a deeper creative awareness of who you are and what you are as a creative. And I think what also comes with that is a sense of clarity. So you know what it is that you can do. And when you have that understanding, you're more sure and you're more confident in yourself. And your value as a creative increases. So it's quite a meta thing, getting good at pitching, because essentially, one thing that happens is it's a mindset switch, right? And so much of what happens to life is to do with our attitude. Putting these, just doing this live. It's like I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm going to talk about. I've got some pretty slides. The value here is not going to come necessarily from sort of like, what I've researched beforehand. The value here is going to come from my attitude, whether I can be present, whether I can be engaged, whether, I can look you in the eye as I'm trying to do with the camera. It's kind of challenging when you do stuff like this, but I'm getting used to it, just talking to a green dot. It's my attitude. That's what's important. So, what is the big idea that I have for you? During my career, I was always about under-promise, over-deliver, and I'm sticking to that now. I don't want to go overboard with massive claims, but if you follow this process, and full disclosure, there's at the end of this, not at the end of this session, but at the end of session number 3, there's an opportunity, there's an invitation if you want to work with me further. On developing pictures, there's something I'm going to talk about, and what I'm offering you is the ability to double the speed you write your treatments and triple your success rate. So halve the time it takes you to do a pitch and triple the number of pitches that you win. I'm going to do a quick recap now of what I talked about in the live. And for this, we need to jump in my little time machine and go back to, hang on a sec, let me just make sure that I'm still in frame. Jump in my time machine and go back to 1995. And we're in the boardroom of the Hong Kong Jockey Club in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Jockey Club is probably one of the richest institutions. It was the richest institution in Hong Kong, one of the richest institutions on planet. I mean, you know, if you're in Australia, sure, Aussies are like a punt. In fact, I think Australia's got 2% of the world's population and 20% of the world's gaming machines. But Chinese, yeah, I mean, no one likes gambling like the Chinese like gambling, and the Hong Kong Chinese are no exception. So the Hong Kong Jockey Club was like the top client in Hong Kong, and we were doing a pitch, and it was for an exhibition that they were sort of like, you know, they were putting together the next year, and we were doing the activation for it. And the reason we had our pitch is our chairman was called, I won't say who she was called because I'm going to say some mean things about her. She was, I won't tell you her name, but I will tell you her nickname. It was the Black Widow, right? And she was, she was actually quite evil. She sort of like had this sort of public persona of, you know, this sort of like very refined and sort of like cultivated lady, but she was just savage. She was feral. And I didn't quite know how savage. I mean, I knew that she had a dark side, but I didn't quite know how savage she was. But obviously, you know, she was a chairman of JWT Asia Pacific, and you know, at the time, I was this sort of like, you know, chiseling advertising wanker who wanted to get ahead, you know, at all costs. And so, being on her good side was very important to me. And in this at that moment in time, I was as far as you could possibly be from being on her good side, right, in another galaxy. Because one of the things is, and thank God this wasn't my idea, but the suit in charge of this, he decided that for the creative, what they were going to do is we were going to put together a simulation of what the whole thing would look like. Bear in mind, this is 1995. So a computer simulation was big shit then. It would be the equivalent of having a hologram today. And Titania, good to see you. It would be the equivalent of having a hologram today. We're just talking about the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And anyway, the thing about this thing was the tech didn't work. The people that we'd brought in to put the presentation together for us couldn't get this to work. So we had to stall the presentation 2 hours. 2 freaking hours we kept the board of the Hong Kong Jockey Club waiting. And it's funny, I told this story last week, and I don't normally talk about it, but I was looking for a story that sort of like made what I do relevant. And last week was the first time that I actually had spoken about this publicly. And all I can say is I honestly think this is the most traumatic event I've ever been through in my life, right? And it shouldn't be. I mean, I've been in bar fights, I've been in accidents, I was on a ferry crash where people died, where our junk just got demolished and we all ended up in the water and we almost got killed by boats who were trying to come to rescue us. But what they were doing is they were tearing up to us, and it's like, you know, you get hit by a speedboat, it's like it won't go well for you. I've been in some very unpleasant situations involving large quantities of narcotics in Southeast Asia with very, very dangerous people. But this, let me tell you, this like 2-3 hours where this pitch had stalled in the boardroom of the Hong Kong Jockey Club with the chairwoman looking at me like daggers, it was just the worst. It just absolutely broke my soul. And funnily enough, the one thing that got me through it, I'm going on to a little tangent here, was that it was on a Friday, and that Friday lunchtime, I was going on this lunch with the Second Friday Club. And there used to be a First Friday Club in Hong Kong when Hong Kong was a British territory. back in the 1900s, the governor and all his heads of department, they'd all go out for lunch on the first Friday of the month, and they'd sort of like, figure out what they were going to do, and how they were going to run the place. And on the second Friday, his secretary and all his cronies thought, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So what they did is they all got together and they decided to go and have lunch as well, and basically get pissed and then head off to the bars in Wan Chai, which are full of very amenable young ladies who will do all kinds of things for not a lot of money. And that was the, and the second Friday club, was a tradition that sort of carried on. And, I don't know if it's still going to this day. It probably is, actually. Anyway, it was just one big sort of like, it was a very, very pissy lunch. And then it was afternoon of debauchery. And I was really looking forward to that. I was like, I was just, in my head, I was going, no matter how horrible this is, no matter how traumatic this is, if I can just get through, at lunchtime, I will be okay. At lunchtime, I will be okay. At lunchtime, I will be okay. Right? I think the biggest cliche in recovery is just for today, or one day at a time. But really, that's what I was just focused on, getting through to lunch, because then I'd be safe, and then I'd be able to drown my sorrows and trying to forget this appalling experience that I was in. Anyway, the presentation did not go well. We finally were presenting the tech. We put on this like grand reveal, put on the simulation, and half the people weren't even looking; they were talking, and it was just ugh. But I went off to lunch, and I tried to forget about it, and I suppose in many ways I did forget about it up until sort of like 3 weeks ago, when I needed to sort of like really understand what it was that had taken me on this journey to where I am today as the #1 ghostwriter of director treatments. So anyway, what happened was this experience broke my soul, right? I think it actually goes down to, I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, right? And the Enneagram is a very, very interesting thing. It separates the world up into 9 personality types. It's used in, it's sort of like the Franciscans and the Jesuits and the Catholic Church are quite interested in it. It's had a resurgence in evangelical Christianity recently. Spiritual directors like to understand which Enneagram their clients are, so they can better advise them. And it's about personality types. But the idea is that your personality type is based on your childhood wound. And my childhood wound is that I grew up in an unsafe and hostile family environment. So my big thing was I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be able to feel safe. I wanted to be able to be safe myself, and I wanted to be able to protect other people. And in that situation, I felt violently unsafe. Ironically enough, it's like it was, what was most important to me was the safety of my psyche, because I've been in, as I just said, I've been in environments where my physical safety was threatened, where I've been in environments where where people are trying to kill me, but that wasn't. I mean, I suppose when you're in physical threat, something else happens in your head, because you're actually dealing with, that threat. But this was the time when I suppose I felt most unsafe. So after I came out from that, I thought, you know what, never again. Never, never, never again do I want to go through this experience. It just broke me, and I just felt like an utter and complete failure. And so from that moment on, I resolved that what I wanted to do was I just wanted to protect myself from this situation. And I started getting involved in more pitches. Now, pitches in agencies were generally just very, very stressful, very, very chaotic affairs. But then let me tell you, working at JWT in the 90s in Hong Kong, it's like, just working there was a stressful, chaotic affair. I mean, we got paid well, but man, they really got their pound of flesh. Mind you, it was very exciting. We used to get TV briefs come in on a Friday, and we'd be in pre-production we'd get the brief come in on the Monday, and we'd be in pre-production by the Friday. And the budgets were huge. So, you know, I'm not complaining. But I've been doing this for a while, and the thing with pictures is that if you were pitching regional pieces of business within JWT, then what they'd do is they'd fly you to other countries, put you up in a nice hotel, and you got to hobnob with the most senior people in that country. You know, the first person that you'd be dealing with would be the country head, the CEO of that office. So I was like, oh, this is kind of useful. I kind of like this lifestyle. And the other thing was, as a creative, I mean, every creative wants to be the most creative. And the way you can prove that you're the most creative is by winning the most awards. And that's why, you know, we've seen this massive proliferation in award ceremonies. But the problem with that is, like, there can be only one, right? And there's, you know, even if you do win the most awards one year, then you've got to be, you know, you've got to be able to do that the next year. And, you know, it's now so gamified that it's nuts. So how do you distinguish yourself as a creative? There's some people who are really good on the category, some people who specialize in beauty, you know, some people who specialize in retail. But the idea that I had was to be a new business specialist, was to be the guy who could develop shit hot creative very, very quickly for new business pitches. Because this synced with a piece of wisdom that someone gave me when I was, well, funny enough, when I was selling double glazing, which I did while I was, which is something that I used to do when I was supposed to be at school. And he said, Paulie, this old closer, he said, Paulie, the secret to making money is to make other people money. And I was like, he said, if you can make money for other people, you'll always be able to make money. And I was like, oh, wow, I really like that. And so being a pitch specialist, focusing on new business as a creative, that's essentially what you're doing for an agency. You're always making sure that they've got new business coming in. And new business is the lifeblood for any agency. Because no matter who your clients are, once they come in, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, at some point, they're going to leave. So cut a long story short, I could go on, but we've got a lot of stuff to get through. About 6 months after the trauma at Hong Kong Jockey Club, I joined the pitch for Thai International. JWT was pitching for Thai International against Saatchi's and O&M. That is as big a pitch, Thai International being the airline, that's as big a pitch as agencies would get involved in those days. And I really enjoyed it. The process was led by a guy called Mark Capra, who'd obviously read a book on project management, and he just had this really, really tight process about how you run a pitch. And I was like, wow, it's really not that difficult. It doesn't have to be that difficult. Essentially, what it is that you make sure that you have one pitch leader, you have very clearly defined roles. You take the client's brief, you write your internal agency brief, then probably the most critical thing is you get everyone to agree on that. You get everyone, including the chairman, including the president, you get everyone to agree what it is that we should be saying. Then you brief it into creative, and then the magic thing is that you make sure that you get all the materials back 48 hours beforehand, so that you spend the next 48 hours going through the logistics of the presentation, the tech, and rehearse. That is so important. So I was like, wow, it's that easy. I can do that. That gave me a process, that gave me a structure. It showed me that actually doing pitches could be fun. They don't need to be very stressful. In fact, they could be very, very exciting and just a very, very positive experience. So I was like, wow, who wouldn't want to do that? So how does this relate to? So from there on, I just became Mr. New Business. In actual fact, I worked at JWT. I then came to Australia. I worked for Lowe's. I decided to actually do an MBA because I thought, it would be good as a, for a creative to be able to sort of like, talk like an adult was I wouldn't say it was a rare thing, but a lot of creatives didn't have a lot of credibility. So I went and did my MBA to consolidate my management, my strategic skills. And when I came back, my focus, that's when I went and joined BBDO Malaysia as their executive creative director. Again, I got picked because I said, look, one thing I can do is I can build the agency folio. So for me, this was really life-changing. And how this relates to writing treatments is I'm good at writing treatments because, as I said, I've been writing TV commercials for 30 years. I've probably produced, between 3,000 and 4,000 by now. But about 9 years ago, I was in Bali and I was new in recovery, and there were a couple of meetings that I wanted to go to. They had 7 a.m. meetings were, no, was it 7? 8 a.m. meetings were AA, and the 7 p.m. was NA. And I'd just arrived in Bali, and I'd heard the meetings there were great, and I wanted to make 4 meetings. I wanted to do Saturday mornings, Saturday evenings, Sunday morning, Sunday evening. And over this weekend, I landed 2 jobs, both for A-list directors. One was for the director who'd shot Taken 2, and the other one was a very, very successful commercial director. One was a beauty job. They were both for China. One was a beauty job and the other one was a car job. And actually quite stressful, you would think, right? But at the time, and I'd only been writing treatments for about 2 or 3 years, less than that, a couple of years. At the time, where my head was at was like, oh my God, I really want to go to these meetings. I really want to go to these meetings. So what was stressing me out wasn't actually writing the treatments. It was like, how do I get to my meetings? I want to be able to go to all 4 meetings, which is not a bad thing because in early recovery, meetings are essential. One of the things that, one of the great things, it's like anything in life. The template for success in recovery is creating a solid foundation, building good habits, and remaining consistent. So I really wanted to go to these meetings, and I had these 2 massive jobs. So I remember I sat down and I thought, okay, fine. How can I develop an approach where I do the same thing for one as I do for the other? Obviously not the same exact copy or the same techniques from a cinema lighting point of view. But what's the approach? What's the structure? And I cracked it, and I was able to, on the Saturday I did one, on the Sunday I did the other, and I made all my meetings, and that sort of like, that for me was the genesis of the Pitchcraft process that I'm going to be talking about later. So that's my story. JWT, horrible situation in a pitch. Never wanted to feel that broken or that much of a failure ever again. Decided I wanted to learn how to pitch. Found that there was a process, there was a structure, and now I've applied that to writing director treatments. Now, when you do this, as I said earlier on, when you do this, what you get is something that I like to call the A-list advantage. And when I say that, it's like my I would say probably 90% of my business comes from 8 or 9 clients. They're the ones that really keep me busy. They're pitching all the time. I'm sure you've heard of the Pareto's law. And that's the idea. It's the 80-20 rule. It's like, if you go to a wedding, it's like 80% of the booze is drunk by 20% of the people. Or if you go to a buffet, it's like 90% of the food is consumed by 10% of the people. I think it was first, Pareto was an Italian economist, and he observed that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. There's always a disproportionate, whether it's whether it's 595 or whether it's 1090 or whether it's 8020, there's always that serious imbalance between, you know, people who generally have all the good stuff. And actually in the Bible, there's also something called the Matthew principle, which is kind of scary. And it says, for those who have, more will be given. But for those who have not, even that shall be taken away. And what that means is that when you actually start becoming successful, it feeds on itself. It kind of creates a virtuous circle. So so you get a little bit of success, and then you get more and more and more and more, and it builds. And unfortunately, the reverse is true. It's like, you know, when you start going down a hole, it's like, you know, you can find your, you know, things are going wrong for you. If you don't take immediate action and have a really, really solid intervention, then you can find your life circling the drain pretty quickly. Trust me, I speak from personal experience. So that's what I find. There comes a point when you're putting together pictures, when you're putting together pitch decks, there's a tipping point. And once you go past that tipping point, you know, you're good. A success attracts more success. Why? Because confidence is infectious. For that to happen, there are 3 shifts that need to occur. Firstly, why do clients pay us all this big money anyway? To make shit cool. That is absolutely, and I talk about this in Pitchcraft, my masterclass. That is ultimately why people are hiring us. You know, the unspoken rule behind every single client brief is please, 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 Mr. Advertising Guy, make my shit cool, right? And that's why, you know, at one level, the most important thing that you can possibly do is have great image research. That is absolutely vital. But at the end of the day, you've got to present yourself as cool. You've got to have a very, very cool take on the concept that they're delivering. Ultimately, as a director, why are you being hired? People hire you for your taste. You know, your job is to have good taste and to make stuff look cool. So it's really understanding that selling is seduction. It's absolutely as simple as that. The second thing is when I write a treatment. I mean, if you were going to, you know, if I was going to turn this live into 5 seconds, this is what I would tell you. You can write this down. There are 3 things you want to communicate. The 3 ingredients, as I like to call them. I know, not very imaginative, but hey, the 3 ingredients. I try and communicate 3 things when I'm writing a treatment: excitement, enthusiasm, and expertise, right? Excitement for the brief or the idea, enthusiasm for the project, for the shoot, for how we're going to handle this in pre and post production, and expertise, the idea that I can do this. And that may sound obvious, but let me tell you something. Common sense is not common practice. And this is one thing that I've seen a lot of clients struggle with, that they find it difficult to tell, they find it difficult to tell the agency and the client that they are absolutely the right person for that job. Americans tend to be quite good at this. Brits are either good or terrible, and Europeans struggle with this one a lot, unless they're Italian. For some reason, Italians have that sort of like level of confidence. So that's what you want to communicate. That has to be your focus in your treatment. Excitement for the brief and the idea, enthusiasm for the project, the shoot, pre-production, post-production, and expertise. The fact that you know how to do this, and good luck to them if they trust some other bozo. And finally, again, this comes down to mindset, right? It's about developing a persuasion obsession, right? I've been obsessed on how to make pictures as persuasive as they possibly can for going on for 25 plus years now. It's a mindset. It's an idea that sort of like, you know, pitching isn't sleazy. Actually, I'm stealing my own glory here. I'll talk about that later on. But it's really getting under the skin of the client and doing everything you can to Jedi mind trick them into picking you as the director. So that's what we do want to accomplish. Here are things that we really want to avoid. Firstly, you can't bore someone into buying shit from you, right? Don't make your treatment about education, right? It's not about you telling them how you're going to make such a great commercial, commercial for them. The value comes from them making a decision. The value of your treatment comes from them looking at it and going, great, this guy can crack my brief. This is the woman that I should trust with my budget for this commercial, right? Data has no convincing power. Stories are what persuade us. Stories link information with emotion. Okay, and that's why one of the things that I tell my clients about is like put in as many personal anecdotes relevant to the brief, relevant to the script as you personally can. Okay, don't write a lot of jargon about the cameras that you're going to use, or you can there's one section where you can do that, cinematography, but just make it's a couple of paragraphs. The rest of it is about how you as an individual have the personal experience, the energy and the vision and the excitement to bring this to life. 2, believing that pitching is sleazy. Okay, as I said, a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable with the sales process. You just got to get over that. You've got to give yourself a mental reframe. Speaking is selling. We are in the communications business. As a creative, if you want to be, one of the first things that, fortunately I learned was if you want to be a successful creative, you have to be able to present. You have to be able to present, because it's no good coming up with the work if you can't sell it. And the same goes for a director or producer, right? It's like you want to be able to make films, but you have to be able to sell yourself as a filmmaker. Otherwise, no one will give you any films to make. The magic bullet. Now, here's something. Again, so as I said, if you wanted a principle for writing killer treatments, the principle is expertise, enthusiasm, and excitement. That's what you need to communicate in every treatment. And if you wanted a tip, this is it, the magic bullet. So few of my clients actually do this. I always recommend it. I would say less than 5% actually do it. Treatments now are what? 2,000 words, 20, 30, 40 slides. You think people read all those words? They don't. They skim through it on their phone. But I tell you what clients will engage with. They will engage with a 2-minute film that you can shoot either on your laptop or on your phone. And what I do for clients is I say, look, what I do is I write them the whole script. And it's tight, obviously. And I say to them, hey, when you've just record this. Like flip open your phone or your laptop, hit record, and just use the FaceTime camera and just say, hey, really excited about this job, just sent you a treatment, but I thought I'd take a couple of moments and tell you how we're going to nail it. And then just say, oh, bear with me, I've got some notes, right? And then look as if you're reading your notes, and in actual fact what you're reading is this beautiful script that I've written for you, and that's it. Just do it straight to camera. It should look like a FaceTime conversation with a friend. And trust me, when people watch that, when you do that, nothing moves you through the sales process of know, like, trust faster than those 2-minute films. That absolutely is the magic bullet, and I strongly recommend you do it. And only 5% of my clients actually do it, because you know what? Creative people, as I said, are bad at promoting themselves, and they struggle with being visible. They struggle with bigging themselves up. They struggle with presenting themselves properly. Also, not having a big idea, writing 2,000 words of fluff. Okay? When you write a treatment, there are a few questions you have to ask yourself. Number 1, have I solved their problem? Right? What is their problem? Why are they advertising in the first place? Okay? Have I solved their problem? Number 2, How am I going to do that in a way that's different and unique? Okay, what's your big idea? What's your secret sauce? Okay, ask yourself, would I hire me? Reading this, would I hire me? And one really good way of knowing that is what you should be, when you write a treatment, you should write it in such a way so that either a junior creative or a junior client could read your treatment and they could make a case for you to their boss. And they would say, listen, we really need to use Philip Ducasse on this one, because he's done the 3 incredible car spots, and that bit where we see the chase scene, he is like world class at using the Russian arm, that robotic technique with that camera, right? You have to be able to give ammunition to junior clients so they can go and pitch their bosses and say, this is the guy and why. This is the guy or the gal and the reason why. Finally, lack of hot cognition. Again, this goes back to the idea of making shit cool. We don't know what those kids are doing, but they look cool, right? We want in that. Hot cognition is the ultimate Jedi mind trick. Hot cognition is liking something before you fully understand that. And that can work with a shiny object, that can work with a human being, that can work with a book cover. It's like you see something, you don't quite understand it, but you know that you want it. And how you do that is by building in scarcity and building in intrigue and building stories into your presentation. Remember, a treatment is a piece of content in itself, all right? Treat a treatment like you're writing and designing a magazine article. So, we've discussed 5 mistakes today. It's time to drop some notes. I'd love to hear what you think is most valuable. Just drop me a comment in the feed. Let me know what you think's been most valuable. I'm waiting for the I'm waiting for the chat to catch up with, because actually I'm not broadcasting in real time. There's like a 2-minute delay. Anyway, we'll come back to that in a moment. When I get the comments, I'll come back to what we've done. Let me know which mistake you've made, and what we can talk about now. I mean, the issue now is, how do you implement this effectively in our life and in our business? So if you've seen this presentation, if you think this has been valuable, if you've said, yeah, Paul, okay, this is great, but I'd like to drill down and get specific about how I should do this moving forward as a director myself, send me an email or drop me a message on Facebook. Just message me. And if you want a copy of this presentation, then message me on Facebook and give me your email address, and I'll get it over to you. And it's been almost an hour, so I think that's going to be a wrap. Just a quick one. Let me see if there's any questions. Doesn't appear to be any. So it's 4 a.m. in Sydney. It's now 5 a.m. in Sydney, so it's almost time for my breakfast. Thanks for joining me. I'm very excited. There's going to be one more live, and that's going to happen on Thursday. I'm not sure what time. I actually think the last time slot I did is better than this time slot, so I'll let you know. But stay posted. All the information will be here in the Facebook group. Send me a message with your email address if you'd like the presentation notes, and I will see you again in a couple of days. Take care.